So you want to get moving, but you're not sure how. What next?
You're listening to another Torched original. Are you feeling stuck when it comes to creating content for you and your business? Would you like a podcast of your very own? Or maybe you'd like to stand out and reach new audiences? Head to gettorched.com. That's gettorcht.com today, and we look forward to helping you on your content creation journey. And now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the next episode of What Next. I've got someone sitting alongside of me who, actually trying to work out what to talk about was really hard because he has so much knowledge on so many different topics. And like we often discover when we're doing these podcasts is that everything links in together. And so we've tried to simplify it. So who knows where this goes, like every episode of this podcast. But the aim of this one, of the objective, is for those who are listening and you want to get started with some movement or some exercise, what not to do. So we want to try and give you some guidelines on how not to stuff up and get the most out of your training, I guess. Is that fair to say? Mark.
Yes. Yeah, well, we can definitely try to do that.
Yeah.
For sure, yeah.
So Mark Hallam is he can tell you. Who the hell is Mark Hallam?
Oh, I try and ask myself that question most days. People always go to career-wise for that, don't they? But most importantly, I'm a father.
Yes, of two beautiful
two little girls. So I'm just trying to navigate all of that at the moment. But if you, talk with the focus on training, I've been a trainer now for 10 years. And I always try and think back to why I got into it. I said this to someone before. It's always easy to attach stories retrospectively about why you did something. But I honestly think I did it because I didn't want to do anything else. Like I saw my mates leaving uni, doing things that I don't class myself as particularly intellectual. So loads of my mates went into sort of more of what I'd class intellectual fields. And I thought, I'll just give this a go. And then probably didn't love it at the start because I've got no experience with anything else. So I don't know what other jobs are like. I'd never had a proper job before that.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming a lot of industries are the same. When you first start out, you think, oh my word, what is going on
Well,
here?
I have had corporate experience,
Right.
and I've done this, and I find working with the body is so challenging because the more you know, the more you realise you don't know.
Yeah, and so it's
frightening.
So when I first started out, I was sort of just doing it, whatever, getting by. And then the more I did, the more I fell in love with it because the more I realised I didn't know. And then the more you realise you don't know, the more you want to know. And then the more you know, the more impact you can have. And then, because initially you're not really having a huge amount of impact on people. It's when you start to actually
embrace.
Or have a positive impact on people's lives that you go, oh, this is actually amazing. And
there's nothing better.
No, so I worked in London. Anyone listening can probably tell I'm from England. I'd worked in different gyms in London for about 7 or 8 years, and then fell in love with an Australian, moved over here. I always say that I wanted to live in London, she wanted to live in Melbourne, so we compromised and moved to Melbourne. So moved here, and then met you guys and started working in a studio over here. But my way of training's just evolved a lot over the years as my sort of knowledge and understanding and interests have changed.
And I think your approach is quite unique, and I know that you found the studio because of a few of us had done a training that you had done yourself and connected with, which they have a really interesting approach and unique approach, which is the Institute of Motion. So that's how it kind of connected. I thought it struck gold when you presented to the studio, and this guy's too good to be true. But I've watched you since then grow and evolve, and that's why I've got you on to this podcast to share what you've learnt over the years, and and to help our listeners get started and avoid going down the rabbit hole, because it's overwhelming. The wellness and fitness industries, there's so many different ways, and none of them are right or wrong. There's no right or wrong way. It's just what's right for you and for the body. So we want to try and help people get on that journey. So on that, what would you say is the biggest mistake people make when they first start out?
I'm going to preface this by saying if there's certain things that you enjoy, that's not what I'm addressing. I've put posts out before where I say maybe you shouldn't be doing this, and people are like, I enjoy doing that. It's like, okay, well, fine. What I mean here is if you want to get the most from your training, this is the way I see that I think is the most beneficial way for you to do it. If there's other stuff that you enjoy doing, that's great. You've obviously got to enjoy what you enjoy doing. Those are two separate things.
Yeah, so would you go there's structured movement and then there's incidental?
I think it depends on what you're actually looking to get from your exercise. For a lot of people, they know they should stay fit and healthy, but they have so much other stuff going on in their life. They don't really want to think about training too much. They show up, sweat a bit, they feel good for it, they go home. Or there's people that are actually looking to make, serious physical change, and you have to address those two slightly differently. So the big thing that I think people go wrong with is there's too much. This isn't any individual's fault either. This is just how the industry has evolved over time, which I think I know why. We can go into that in a second, but too much focus on what I'd refer to as external training, so the expression of external strength, as opposed to focus on what you might want to refer to as internal function. So I don't love analogies for fitness because some of them don't work, but I think a good analogy for this is if you were to look at something like a Formula One car, the speed or the way the car performs is that the speed is an external expression of what the performance, the internal performance of the car. Mm-hmm. And if a team wants to gain more speed, they don't just drive faster more times around the track and we'll get more speed. They look internally and go, my car knowledge ends there. So
what can we do? I've watched the Drive to Survive.
But is it the wheels? Is it the chassis? Where internally what do they need to address internally to then enhance those external expressions of speed? And the same for me applies for the human body. And I think a lot of training, what people are focusing on is that external expression of strength, with the hope that that's what's going to progress their training, and not enough focus on what's going on internally.
Yes.
So look at an exercise, for example. So something like a deadlift. People think, the more I just deadlift, the better I'm going to get at deadlifting and the stronger I'm going to get. But if you take that back to that car analogy, that's just like going, the faster I drive around the track, the more I drive around the track, the faster I'm going to get.
Which is not the case. And
they're both a skill, but they're both restricted by what is going on internally.
And that's what I love about your training and your approach, is you pare everything back and go fix that first, and then...
Yeah, and it's not always necessarily a case of fixing it. I think it's just addressing it, and what you are able to express externally is always going to be limited by what you can cultivate internally. So it's about making sure that they marry up quite well. And if you have absolutely no focus on that internal expression or that internal expression of strength, you're going to be limited in what you can do externally. And I think a good example of that is we all know people that have been training for 10, 15 years, and realistically they've made almost no progress in that 10 to 15 years, because their sole focus has been on those external expressions of strength or fitness, but that's going to be completely limited by by their internal environment. And so if there's no progression with that internal environment, so what you call the function of the body itself, then they're forever going to be limited with what they can express externally.
So what is the internal?
But there's
Are you referring to what you eat? Are you referring to the joint health? Are you referring to what exactly?
Yeah, so if you look at a lot of training is focused on muscle and the growth of muscle. So I think another mistake that the industry makes is looks too much towards bodybuilding or powerlifting for training programs for the general public, which really aren't particularly applicable.
Totally.
And there's not enough people focus on, right, today I'm going to come in and work my chest, or today I'm going to come in and work my legs and back day, and they forget that your body is more than simply muscle. Even if your focus is on you want to be a bodybuilder, or your goal really is just to grow as much muscle as you possibly can for whatever reason that may be, you have to focus on stuff like joint health, cardiovascular health, because that is then going to aid whatever that goal.
Tissue health, tissue tolerance.
Yeah, and because what people often forget is that muscle has to contract against something. So if your joints basically, and if they're not strong and healthy, there's only going to be it's going to be limited with the amount that they can do that. So what I tend to look at and focus on first is joint range of movement, because all movement originates from joints. That's why your joints are there, to initiate movement. So if you don't have movement at the joint,
makes sense.
Then I'm going to backtrack a bit here. Another mistake people make is
can I just say that it's so hard to talk about the body because it's all intertwined.
Yeah.
So forgive us if he does bounce around.
And then things keep cropping up. So another mistake that people make is they come into the gym. Say you get two friends come into the gym. The mistake they will make is they both think they are in the same position to be addressing or going through the same program, and that they're then going to, that program's going to elicit the same results in both of them. It might.
Yeah.
And especially if you're starting out, a lot of different things work. But that goes back to that point we were saying, a lot of people see progress for a bit and then stagnate for 10 to 15 years. And I think it's probably what the industry needs to do better, rather than any individual. I'm not saying this is any individual's fault, is understand that you coming into a gym environment for the first time, you don't necessarily have the prerequisites that your friend might have to go about performing whatever exercise it might be. So if you're looking at something like a squat, for example, you need your hip to function in a certain way to actually perform that squat. Just going and squatting isn't going to give you the function of the hip that you need to perform the squat. What you really want to do is make sure your hip's functioning to a certain level first before you then, again, it's internal focus before we focus on the external expression of strength. So I think that's another mistake.
So it's like jumping into that race car, and me, never driven a race car before, and expect to drive fast.
Or it'd be like having a Formula One car on the start line, and then your everyday street car on the street. Like they're not going to be able to perform the same externally, because they're internally they're not the same.
Yeah. So where would you suggest someone starting out? What do they need to address? The joint health? Yeah,
I think range of movement, see what your current, what I'd refer to as workspace is, because what that's going to indicate then to you is, right, this is going to show you your prerequisites for movement. And what we really want is joint independence before joint interdependence. What I mean by that is, if you look at something like a squat, you need ankle mobility, knee mobility, hip mobility, spine mobility. So you need to make sure that you have each of those functioning independently before we put them together interdependently. Because if your ankle and knee aren't working, then you're not. It doesn't. When you try and integrate movement with your hip as well, they're not just suddenly going to start working.
No.
You need, as I said, joint independence before joint interdependence. So, I can't remember what your question was. Where would they start? Yes. So what, when you assess joint range of movement, what it then shows you, what your current work capacity or workspace is, and then it can, based on your restrictions, that should guide where your training goes from there. So that's the first thing I'd always look at with someone. I have a method that, as I said, does that. So shows what current work space is and then where current restrictions are, because based on those current restrictions, that will guide how a training program would look moving forward.
So there's I hear often the difference between mobility and flexibility. Do you want to talk about that? Because they're quite very different things.
Yeah, well, I think they have different definitions. So the definition that I like, that I've learned, is, so flexibility for me would be your ability to be pushed into a range of movement. So think if everyone knows a stretch, the hamstring stretch, you're lying on your back, someone stretches your hamstring. That would, for me, so that passive range of movement where someone is pushing you into that range of movement is what I'd refer to as flexibility. Mobility is where you could then take that support away, turn it from passive to active, and it would be your control over that range of movement. So I think another mistake that people make is there's too much focus on flexibility, not enough focus on mobility.
Agreed.
So if you look at something like static stretching, flexibility is a prerequisite for good mobility. You're not going to have good mobility if you have bad flexibility. So it's not that flexibility is specifically bad in itself. It's just not particularly useful if you don't train your body to be mobile and control those ranges of movement, because you need that control not only to train but sort of to avoid injury as well.
Yes.
Because if you can't control a range of movement actively, it means you're not able to generate force in that range of movement.
Imagine loading that.
Yeah, so that's the problem people make. They'll go do something like a yoga class, stretch out loads, go, I can adopt this. Well, I don't do yoga, so I don't know the names of the positions, but this position, now I'm going to load it, but they don't have strength in that range of movement. And when you've got, injury is going to happen when the force going through any tissue exceeds the force-bearing capacity of that tissue. So I think people often think of mobility and flexibility training as just increasing range of movement, but it's really just with that increasing the capacity of your body to load and bear force in those ranges, which is necessary for optimal performance in pretty much anything you do. It's gonna yield better results, whatever your goal is. Even if we take it back to something like bodybuilding, the more range of movement you have, the more control you have over that range, the more tissue you can access. The more tissue you can access, the more you're going to be able to stimulate the muscle, and the more it's going to be able to grow. Sporting performance, injuries usually happen in weird positions that people don't train. The more range of movement you have, the less likely you are to get injured.
What's that end range of stuff is when that injury occurs, isn't it? Because they don't have that control.
Usually, usually at end range,
Okay, so that sounds really complicated. Pare it back for the person listening. You walk into a gym. What do?
I tried to think back to the first time I walked into a gym.
So it's unless obviously what we do, you under the guidance, great. Not everyone can get there. So, where do they start? This is where our industry falls down a little bit, because where do people start? And generally they'll start running.
Yep.
Or they'll jump into a group fitness class, or they'll jump into a yoga class. Go and do bench press.
It's where to start. I think if you're serious about training and you're serious about making some decent results long time, it's worth investing in a coach that's going to be able to assess you for range of movement, maybe current levels of dysfunction. Even if they just go, you know what, you're actually pretty good, I think you can just crack on.
Yeah, spend a little bit at the start and make sure you're okay.
That initial investment is, even if it's 1 or 2 sessions, that at most is going to, just 1 or 2 sessions at most is going to cost you a couple of $100s for a good coach.
Yep.
But that for me in the long term is going to yield much better results. That's where I'd advise everyone to start. If they're not willing to do that, then I don't really know how
You can't.
how I'd advise it, because I can't, because you're basically just guessing at what you need to do.
That's the whole point of that question, because you can't, you don't know where to start. You don't know if you're not assessed or you're not assessing, you're guessing. And how the hell do you know?
That's then me assuming stuff about that person's body when I had absolutely no idea about that body.
Correct.
It's like, my mum always says this to me. She always says, like, Pilates is great for your back. And the assumption there is that everyone's back problems are the same. And if you're, so to say one thing is really good for one thing, it's assuming that, or to say one thing, good for, say, your back, is to assume that everyone's back issues are exactly the same.
Which they're so not.
So it's really hard to give generic advice about what one individual person should be doing, because I've absolutely no idea about that person's background.
Speaking of common mistakes, is people will chitty chat over, at dinner and, what do you do and what do you do for exercise? Like, I'm going to do that. When, it's not necessarily right for you. And, it's going back to what I open with, is no right or wrong way. It's got to be right for that individual and what they need. And, I don't know what your opinion on this is, but variety or variability is so key, because too much of the one thing is never good. So if you do all mobility training and nothing else, it's not going to service you. What are your thoughts on that?
I put a video up about this yesterday, because I also think that depends on the amount of time the person can dedicate to training.
So there's another thing. Where do you put that time?
Yeah, because, for example, I've got clients that I'll train, I'll contact time them maybe an hour and a half a week, and they say, I want to work on this, I want to work on this, I want to work on this, I want to work on this. And I almost think you can get too greedy with your training, whereas I think a lot of people would see better results, go, you know what, I'm going to focus on the next 6 to 12 weeks, I'm going to focus on whatever that might be.
Yep.
Reassess, okay, I've made good progress here, I'm going to do some work to at least maintain what I've done, but now my focus is going to switch to something else.
Is that instant gratification? People think that, just because I've started training for that hour and a half, all this is all going to fall into place and it's all going to happen really quickly. But, it's in some cases it's undoing years of non-movement or bad habits or the wrong way, and expecting it to change in a few weeks.
Yeah, and it's also you're battling another 120 odd hours a week where they're not doing that.
So on that, what would you advise? How often does someone need to move?
Every day.
Okay, good.
But they don't have to train every day.
No.
So if you look again, if we go back to joints, the only way you're going to keep your joints healthy is to move them. So people talk a lot about taking fish oils for your joints. That's fine, but if you're not moving those joints, then
it's pointless.
Completely pointless. So moving in some capacity. Another mistake that people make is they just lump movement into the whole same thing. So I'll get up, I did some movement, I went for a walk. But your shoulder didn't necessarily move in that walk, or your elbow didn't move, your wrist didn't move.
Nice one, yes.
Your spine didn't move. You kept your spine in the same position the whole time. So there's moving, and then there's doing specific work to improve your capacity for movement.
Yeah.
And so I think both are necessary, if you can, every single day.
And that comes back to that variability, doesn't it? So if all you ever do is walk, that's all your body's going to become efficient at, and only those joints that are involved in walking get a workout.
Well, the goal of any training program is adaptation, but the body adapts quite quickly.
Yes,
so the
very
mistake
clever.
that people make is when they think let's go, I don't know, something like a deadlift again. Your body will adapt to that quite quickly, and so when people see the weight going up, they think, I'm continually adapting, whereas your body's just accommodated to it and you've become really efficient at doing it. So you're getting less stimulation from it than you were initially. So
that's why people get results quite quickly and then they plateau.
Yes.
Because you've adapted.
Yeah, and you're not putting new stimulus into any the parts of the body that need them. It's sort of like if you were to look at someone like Michael Phelps, Michael Phelps isn't going to get that much of a good workout from going for a swim compared to someone that's never swum before.
Oh my God, have you ever tried to swim lately? It is so hard.
Yeah, well, okay, that's exactly what I mean, because
really
you've not adapted to
it.
You're so inefficient at it that it's your body hasn't adapted to it, so it will go through that period of adaptation. Whereas you look at someone, like I said, like Michael Phelps, swimming isn't a good workout for him because he's so efficient at it. Yeah. So the best areas to train are the areas that you haven't trained. Yeah. I can't, again, I've lost what the initial thought was here. But I think, that was it. We were talking about walking, weren't we? Yeah, the goal of training is adaptation. Whereas if you just continually do the same thing over and over again, your body will adapt to it very quickly and you won't get the same response that you once did. Yep. So for me, I don't actually think there's anything as maintenance with fitness, because when you first train, you are so say you have to use the same weight over and over and over again when you're doing a specific exercise. Say you can chest press, for example. You come in, you start chest pressing 20 kilos. Your body will respond to that in a certain way because it's a new stimulus. Yes. But it will soon adapt to that. And because it is then no longer a stimulus to it in the same way that it once was, it's not maintaining, you're not stimulating it in the same way, you're actually regressing. Yes. So I think with fitness, you're either progressing or you're regressing. I don't think there's such thing as
going to the gym doing the same shit over and over, you're actually going backwards.
Because your body's not being stimulated in the same way. As I said,
that's why you don't get results.
It will have adapted to it. Yeah. Your body wants to conserve energy. That's what it tries to do more than anything. Yep. So that's why it will adapt to whatever it's doing, so it's not as energy sapping as it initially was, which is good. That's what,
But we're very clever that way.
Yeah, but then you need to find new ways to make the body adapt. Yeah. And I think that people need to remember that the sole goal of training is adaptation. And what I think not enough people think about is what is the adaptation that they are actually trying to elicit from their training.
People don't think about it.
No.
They wouldn't have even thought of it that way. So that's a really good takeout is what are you actually doing? What is the end goal? And make sure that you're moving towards that goal.
Because I think people get too emotionally attached to specific exercises. I put up a video the other day that said it was meant to be slightly triggering,
provoking,
but I said stop squatting, and people I've got so much abuse. People saying I've got soapbox PT, all this sort of stuff. And I said to them, but you're not listening to what I'm saying. I'm saying people are going in and doing that, going, right, I'm going to squat today. Whereas my question to them would be, why are you doing that? And so this, if we go back,
is that the back squat?
Back squat, yeah. So this is where I think we're taking advice from the wrong areas. People look at squatting, deadlifting, bench pressing as right. I've got to get those in because that's what powerlifters do. Powerlifters are strong. I want to be strong. And it's not that I don't think you should do those, but I think the first question you're saying is, okay, what adaptation am I trying to elicit here rather than what exercise should I be doing today? Yep. And you can elicit the same response from a lot of different exercises. 100%. So my argument with that was I don't think that's a suitable exercise for most people because, again, going back to what I was saying before, they don't have the internal environment to get the most from that external expression of strength. But people are so emotionally tied to exercises, but what I don't see why people care so much about the exercise when really what we should care about is the response. And we should look at the adaptation first. Go, right, this is the adaptation that I want. Based on where I am at, what is the best, most suitable, most efficient way for me to get to that adaptation? But people come in and go, right, today I'm going to squat. Yeah, yeah. And I think they're looking at it the wrong way. But yet people, as I said, they're so emotionally tied to those things.
Okay, so let me challenge you on a couple of things, right? So in terms of client excuses for not doing stuff, or like what are some good ones you've heard, and then what's your response
for not doing stuff?
Yeah.
I once had a client say that she heard you shouldn't do odd reps of anything.
Odd reps.
Odd reps.
Like 7 or 9 or 11. Oh my God. And?
I told her that was bollocks. I'm sure she just made that up. I can't imagine anyone told her that.
Maybe she's like me. I don't like doing odd numbers, maybe.
It's funny as well because people get so tied to numbers about, right, I'm going to do 10s or 6 as if the body knows what the number is, and they don't focus on, right, how am I... What matters is how you apply and execute whatever it is that you're doing rather than the number of times you are doing it, because you could do a set of 6 and finish like you could do 50 more, or you can do a set of 6 and feel like you can't do any more, and they're not the same thing, yet people just go, right, I'm doing my 4 sets of 6 there, 4 sets of 10. And again, it's not that those...
Or they're so disappointed if they're meant to do 15 they get 12.
Yeah.
But they physically can't do any more. It's a good thing.
For me, that's better. But I'm not saying you shouldn't have those numbers, those target numbers, but I think the focus should be more on the execution of application of whatever it is that you're doing, as opposed to just counting the numbers.
Yep. And so you mentioned you got 2 little kids. So there'll be a lot of, whether you're male or female, that have got kids.
Yep.
Challenges. How do you get your training in still? Any advice for those people who are in that space? I'm a bit lucky, mine are older.
Yeah. First off, I have an extremely understanding wife, and I've communicated to her, and she knew anyway, the importance of training to me. So I think a lot of parents become they become selfless and look at their children, as you should, as a priority, but your kids need you to be at your best. You're no use to them if you're moody, you're tired, you're grumpy. So there has to be times in your week when you're selfish. And so I think communication, if you're lucky enough to have an understanding partner and say, look, this is important to me, this is why it's important to me, but this is how it's also going to benefit. If I can take 3 hours a week to go and train at the gym, and I'd like, maybe they'd like to do the same, and it's a reciprocal thing. This isn't just a vanity thing for me. This is for me to be able then to actually perform better at home, better at work, and give more to the family. Because I know for me, if I don't get my training in, my mindset's not as good. I'm more grumpy. I'm less energetic, and the thing I get most from is when I'm high energy, playing with my girls, and they love that most as well. If I'm sitting there grumpy, like my back hurts or whatever, that's not as good for them. So I think understanding that you have to be selfish at times to be a good parent is my view on it. So that's communication with your partner as well. Secondly, I think just understanding it goes back to what we were saying before. Okay, so what do I actually want to get from my training? So for me now, my training's less geared towards looking a certain way. I'm married. I don't really need to be impressing anyone too much. Look, I'd be lying. I think anyone that says they don't want to look, they don't care about aesthetics when they train is lying.
100%.
I think that's 100%. Everyone trains for a little bit of that, but it doesn't need to be the sole focus. I think if you do anything,
that's external motivation, right?
But if you train in a specific way, whatever the way you train, if you do it well and then you eat well, you're going to look pretty good anyway. You might not look like a bodybuilder, but most people don't want that. So understanding, okay, what do I actually want to get from my training now is an important one. So I think when a lot of people become parents, that motivation changes to go, I just want to be able to get up and down and play with my kids. I don't want my back to hurt when I'm changing my child's nappy. I don't want to be tired after 2 minutes playing. I want to have the sustained energy throughout the day. So I think really understanding how your training is going to advance that is quite important. And then what I talk to my clients about is having a scale. So when you're feeling 10 out of 10, understanding what you can do with your training and nutrition when you're feeling at 10 out of 10, but with the acceptance that there's going to be some days when you feel like a 3 out of 10. And instead of looking at it as binary, going, right, well, today I'm training, or no, I'm not going to train because I'm tired, going, well, I feel a 3 out of 10 today. I know what I've promised myself to do when I was 3 out of 10. It might just, instead of having a hard session, it might just be going for a walk and doing that daily mobility routine, and thinking forward and sympathizing with the times you are going to be tired, lethargic, grumpy.
Yeah, life's not perfect. It doesn't have to be 100% every time, yeah.
And having almost that scale, I've encouraged people to write it down on the past, go, right, 10 out of 10 looks like this, 9 out of 10 looks like this, 2 out of 10 looks like this. And when you're feeling that 2 out of 10, you go, right, well, I know I can at least get this done.
Yeah.
And then you're not having that, you don't have that constant stop-start.
Rather than do nothing. Because and that's the other thing that the mistake people make is that inconsistency. If they go hell for leather for 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, and then they drop off, for a month and they stop. And that's just, the body does not like the stop and start. It's got to be a constant movement. It doesn't mean, like, especially with holidays, right? People don't have their gym, they don't have their trainer or whatever it is around, and they just sit on their ass for 3 weeks and then they whinge and bitch when they come back. It's like, well, just do something different. Swim, bike ride, hike. It's still movement, but don't just sit plonk. A week, I guess, isn't going to be too bad. But, if you do that for the week and then it takes you another couple of weeks to get into it, then you kind of get sick. Next thing you know, it's 3 months are gone, you've done nothing.
Yeah.
And then you go hell for leather again. It's just not okay. The body doesn't like it.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
so if you use that scale that you've just said, then you're more likely to keep moving all the time.
I think it's just that knowledge that, all right, I know I'm going to be something, because I think making it a non-negotiable is good as well. If you have that scale in mind, it's always a non-negotiable. Right? I'm going to be doing something of some sort. Whereas if you look at it, right, I don't feel good to train, so I'm not training because I can't do what I'd initially planned, then you're more likely to negotiate yourself out of doing what you said you would do. Whereas... Yeah. And
I think that's normal, right? Even, I'm sure you do it, I know I do it. You don't always want to train. And, I always say to myself, just put on my clothes and just start. And if after 10 minutes I still feel terrible, then I abort, or I just go for the walk.
But how many times do you abort?
Never.
Like,
you never.
And that's the thing. Make it easy for yourself to... I think that's another important thing as well. People need to set themselves up for success.
Yes.
Like, don't join a gym that's half an hour away. Don't promise yourself you're going to train at 4 a.m. if you know you're not a morning person. Don't do something that you hate. Like, a lot of people say, oh no, I should start running. I say, why? They go, oh, it's good for you, isn't it? I say, do you like running? No. Well, you're not going to do it. Like, it's such an odd mindset.
You get that all the time. What about the one where I need to get fit before I join a gym?
Yeah, that's bizarre.
It's bizarre, but that is so common.
Bizarre.
It's just like, that needs to change.
Yeah. So setting yourself up for success is a really important one.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people go, right, these are the results I want to see, so I'm going to see the best results if I train every single day. Whereas I think it's better to say, right, I'm going to train. Tell yourself you're going to train at least 3 times this week. And if you do a 4th, brilliant. Whereas if you say you're going to train 4 times that week and you miss out and you do 3, you feel like you failed. Whereas if you go, right, I'm definitely going to do 3. And if I do a 4th, great. If you hit the 3 there, you feel like you've succeeded. You've done the same amount of sessions as the person that said they were going to do 4, but missed that 4th one. But the mindset around it's different.
Very different.
Feel like, right, I've done what I said I was going to do, whereas that other person didn't do what they say they were going to do. I think if you continually don't do what you say you're going to do, then you lose trust in yourself.
Yeah.
And self-esteem goes down. Whereas if you continually do what you say you were going to do, so you're going to build your self-esteem.
Like you said, non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Setting up non-negotiables, and that's one of them. If you can only realistically do 3-4 times a week, then set yourself, you have to do 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then when you do the 3 and the 4, it's a big tick. Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. All right. One more thing. When we talk about nutrition, because we get asked a lot about, I need a meal plan, need to be told what to eat. What's the big mistake people do there in your experience? I can give you my opinion.
Yeah,
I want yours.
I think too much restriction isn't necessary for most people, but then it's a fine balance, because you'll speak to some people who don't make any changes. Like, people say, oh, I've got to live. It's like, well, yeah, but you want to change as well. You need to make some sort of change. again, I think it's different for different people.
Yeah, which is really tricky.
Yeah. So I think, again, going back to what I said before, nutrition-wise, I think it's more about your mindset around it rather than necessarily the foods that you're eating. So, again, setting yourself up for success is important. You're not going to get well in the same environment that you got sick. So if you're just at home and going, oh, I'm just not going to eat that food that's there, you are going to eat it.
Totally.
Yeah. So again, having, if your partner does the shopping, it's having that conversation with them saying, look, this is what I'm trying to change. Do you mind if we align our shopping?
Or hide the chocolate somewhere where I don't know where it is.
My wife does that to me. She hides chocolate. I'll go and find nappies sometimes, and then under the nappies there's chocolate bars.
I love it.
But,
good on you,
setting
mate.
yourself up for success, like making it easy to make the right decision.
Yeah.
Because when you're tired, when you've had a long day at work, if you've got family at home and they're stressing you out, whatever, it's going to be so easy to make the wrong decision.
Yeah.
So setting yourself up for success there.
I think that's the biggest takeout, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and people always focus on so much of go, what do I eat? What should I eat? But they also need to understand why they eat the way that they do.
Totally.
Like do you eat because you're bored? Do you eat because you're stressed? Do you eat because you're emotional? Do you eat because, you and your partner have certain habits? And once you understand that, everyone knows roughly what they should be eating. I think it's better to look at, okay, why are you eating the way that you are? Okay, so if you're bored, well, what can we do to satisfy that? Because what you want in that situation isn't the food, it's the feeling that you get from eating the food. So if you're looking to satisfy your boredom, what else can you do to satisfy the boredom that doesn't involve food? When you're stressed, what can you do to relieve that stress that doesn't involve food? Because again, it's not, you don't want a food, you want to relieve the stress.
Yeah.
If you're, emotional, what can you do to address that as opposed to simply just eating? Because again, it's not the food, it's the feeling that you associate with having that food. So finding ways that you can feel that same emotion that don't involve eating, I think, is the first thing that people should do, rather than just completely changing what they eat.
And at the end of the day, they need to have to want to change.
Oh,
otherwise you're going nowhere.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, people struggle with that a lot. But
that's another thing, motivation. I think people rely too much on motivation. I'm not motivated. You speak to most people that are super consistent with their training and in good, 40 to 50% of the time, they're probably not motivated to train. They just show up and do it.
It's habit.
Habit and it's discipline.
Yep.
And it's having that as a non-negotiable. So I think that's a mistake that people make as well. Expecting to feel motivated to do it all the time, and relying on that motivation to then do it. Whereas,
and it comes back to finding your why, doesn't it?
I think that's something people don't spend enough time on. They go, oh, I want to lose weight. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you really need to understand, I think there's like 6 levels or 6 questions of why I want to lose weight. Why? Because I don't like sitting in the mirror. Why is that important to you? Oh, because it affects my confidence. Why is that important to you? Oh, because that affects my intimacy with my partner. Why is that important to you? Oh, because I really value my relationship with my partner.
And there it is there.
Yeah, so
there it is. That right at the bottom.
But that's so different to going, oh, I just want to lose a bit of weight.
Totally, yeah.
And I think if people want to be more motivated or more disciplined, understanding how what you're doing benefits other people in your life, I think that's much easier to do as a parent. When you're on your own, you're single, that's kind of harder to do.
Yes.
But I think understanding how you taking care, you prioritizing self-care has a positive impact on other people.
It does, whereas people feel bad because they've gone to the gym or whatever. But it's, if you can't look after yourself, it's that old saying, then you're useless to anyone else.
And you're always more accountable to other people than yourself. So I think that's why people if they can afford it, like having a trainer, because they feel accountable to them. But then if you can see that you are actually accountable to people around you, that's I
love that.
Help push you a bit more as well.
Yeah. So summing up, I think the common thread and the message that you're giving is understanding the why, understanding why you're doing an exercise, understanding why you're you're moving, understanding understand your non-negotiables, understand your why, go deeper than just the top surface. Like really sit with that for a while, because in those times where you're feeling unmotivated, that's what's going to get you across the line.
Yeah,
to
I think
move.
people just follow what other people are doing and expect it to resonate with them, and it doesn't.
No.
So yeah, definitely think more about why you are doing anything.
What you're doing, and seek advice, because how the hell do you know where to start? It's like starting up a business. You don't just open the doors and there you are. You do your research, and I think that's a big message as well. And like any industry, there's good and bad, and you just got to ask the questions. And you know, if we talk about the mistakes people make with a trainer, they'll just.
I think a good way to test if you've actually got a good trainer is to ask them why you are doing what you're doing. I've had clients that they'll say, "Why are we doing this?" Sorry, I'm being sort of intrusive or whatever. I say, no, that's a good question to ask, because if you want to know, you should know, and I should be able to explain why 100%. We are doing something. So if
they're not asking questions,
or if your trainer can't answer that, then maybe that's a sign that you might want to go and ask someone else. But also, as a trainer, it's good because it then tests you. I think a lot of the time you can just go through the motions and then, get caught in the same trap as just doing what you've done previously. So I think it's good to have definitely good to ask that question about why am I doing something, if you're being trained or if you're the trainer.
Communicate, ask questions. Yeah. It's your body. You've only got one of them.
Yeah.
You've got to look after it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, I think that's important for people to understand, and for trainers to ask themselves as well, what am I doing really working? Because I think, again, if you look at your client and they're not really seeing any progress, it's easy to put and they've got to take account for that as well, but you've got to really ask, is what I'm doing, is the time I'm spending with them the best? Am I being as efficient with that time as I possibly can?
Yeah, I like that. I bet you that doesn't happen a lot though.
Probably not. No.
Awesome. Okay, well, I reckon we've covered off lots of bite-sized information there, and some little tips. But I think the big things is the non-negotiables, ask questions, and think about the why. Would be my top three.
And then training the body internally as opposed to just externally.
Which you need help with that, because I'm thinking not everyone's going to understand that.
No. Again, I'd just seek help in that, because people are happy to, again, nothing wrong with it, spend $200 on a nice Lululemon outfit.
Or more.
But then go and spend that money.
Or on a designer handbag.
Learn how to train.
Yeah.
And that's going to last much longer than the
love it.
leggings and top.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Mark.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Till next time.
Yeah, till next time. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of What Next? I'm Kirsty Robbie, and if this episode sparked any questions and you want to know more, please hit us up on our socials at whatnext_with KR, and have a great day.
You're listening to another Torched Original. Are you feeling stuck when it comes to creating content for you and your business? Would you like a podcast of your very own? Or maybe you'd like to stand out and reach new audiences? Head to gettorched.com. That's GETTORCHT.com today, and we look forward to helping you on your content creation journey.